Welcome to UnityNow, the podcast where we discuss unity stemming from the Unity 2020 plan with one goal in mind: bring unity to America and end the Republican-Democrat duopoly. This podcast is created, produced, hosted, recorded, edited, and publicized by a wonderful team of Unity volunteers that came together from all over the country to collaborate in a completely remote environment. To provide a brief introduction to Unity, we offer this. Unity 2020 was an idea that started when Bret Weinstein announced the plan on the Joe Rogan Experience in mid-June 2020. From there, the movement was born, and since then, tens of thousands of volunteers have signed up, organized, and begun to create a groundswell of support. The plan always introduced a fail-safe so we would not be an election spoiler. This was to end the plans for the 2020 election if it was determined there was no viable path to the White House. Sadly, this became the case. In keeping our promise, this fail-safe was executed and announced by Bret Weinstein. However, we believe Unity continues to be the number one antidote for what ails the country right now, and so we are pressing on with a renewed spirit. To learn more and become a volunteer, visit articlesofunity.org and check out Bret Weinstein's YouTube page and the Articles of Unity YouTube page for the weekly campfires.
Welcome to UnityNow podcast, the podcast where we discuss all things Unity. My name's Gabe Garber, and I'm here joined today with Richard Harris. Welcome, Richard.
All right, good to see you.
Thanks. Likewise, we are here with the intention to talk about our experience working at the polls on Tuesday. We're recording this the day, Sunday, November 8th, the day after the race was finally called for President-elect Biden. It's worth mentioning that just by the time we'll have some lag by the time we're posting this. But for some context, we're still fairly fresh with the results. Any first comments on that, Richard?
I wasn't surprised by the result, but I was surprised by how close it was. Even though I was, skeptical of polling all along, the margins that were put out there and sort of the general vibe was leading me to believe that it was going to be a lot more comfortable win for Biden than it turned out to be. And I guess I was also surprised at some of the internals on the polling. For example, that Trump did worse apparently with white males than the last time, and did way better with Hispanic and black males the last time. And I guess the other thing I was pleasantly surprised about was the size of the turnout on both sides.
Yeah.
I was a little bit worried that there would be a substantial number of people that were so turned off. And maybe I got that from all my interactions on Unity, that some people would be, just bailing, but apparently not, which is good news.
Oh yeah, great news to see that. And yeah, kind of feeling similarly of just kind of a not necessarily surprised, but also coming from a place where I feel like I might have said that either way it turned out. So I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into that. But yeah, we asked you here. We kind of put a call out within our volunteer core to see if anybody else worked on election day at the polls. I did that as well. So we figured we would just bring you on and chat a little bit about that, and just kind of, compare our experiences, compare the processes, maybe a few, you're over on the East Coast. I served here in Columbus, Ohio. So we'll get into that, but yeah, I guess before we do that, if you wanted to give our listeners a little bit of a background of your career, what your focus has been, and we'll bounce off from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess you could say, because I'm the second income in my family, I had two careers. One was a political science professor, and the other was daycare, childcare. So I guess the way to start is I got my undergraduate degree from Duke University. I grew up in New York area, New York City and Long Island, left there and never went back. Met my wife down in North Carolina. We wound up both going to grad school at the University of Pennsylvania, and she got out before I did. Worked for, this will tell you how old I am. She worked for Deloitte Haskins and Sells, which was a big 8 accounting firm, as opposed to a big 3 or 4. And she worked for Bell Atlantic, and we kind of settled in the Philly area. And I got a job at Rutgers University in political science at their Camden campus right outside of Philadelphia. And I worked there for 39 years. I retired just this past spring. I guess July 1st, I was officially emeritus at Rutgers University.
Great.
And
Congratulations.
while I was there, I taught American politics. That's where I did my research and publication, with a specialization in business government relations, regulatory policy. And I also taught in our Masters of Public Administration program and our PhD in Public Affairs. I had various administrative posts. I've kind of seen lots of changes in higher ed, and we can talk about that a little bit if you want. And we retired to Lewes, Delaware. That's Lewes, like in England. We even have a T-shirt in town that says Lewis, Loois, because everybody says lose when they come here. And it's we had a beach home here, and this is where we've retired.
Gotcha.
We also have an apartment in D.C. because I have 2 of our 3 kids live in the D.C. area, so we get there quite a bit.
Great. Yeah, I was going to ask. I saw the, obviously New Jersey, Philadelphia area, but speaking a little bit beforehand, you told me you volunteered at the polls in Delaware, so that
I did, yeah. So because I'm retired this summer, I still wanted to find a way to be engaged, and I figured all these years I've taught about American politics. Let me get inside the beast here. So
this was your first time.
And, worked at a poll in actually Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which is the next town over.
Great, cool. Well, before we get into that a little bit, we nabbed you within our Unity ranks, and come to find out after putting the feelers out specifically because of doing poll work, we found out that you are a member of our red team within Unity, which Eric, our producer on the call today, just interviewed Craig and Travis episode or 2 ago. So our listeners will
charged.
know a little bit about it, but
Travis is a very persuasive guy. I think when I got involved in Unity initially, I had been following the Dark Horse podcast. I guess once I retired, I figured I got to try and keep up to speed on things. So I explored a lot of podcasts, which I didn't have time for before, and had always been a big admirer, in fact, inspired by Brett and Heather. And the talk about Unity on their podcast got me to explore that, along with Braver Angels and a couple of other organizations. And one of the things I'm still writing about now and very concerned about is polarization in American politics. We can talk about that a little bit later. In any event, I made some fairly critical comments on the Unity site about the strategy of Unity and how it may or may not have been evincing a robust understanding of American politics. And Travis picked up on that and said, oh, well, if we want to stress test this thing, this Harris guy might be helpful.
Nice. Well, yeah, we're glad to have you aboard. It was fun learning about the red team from a few of them. But yeah, I don't know if it might be fun too, just to get a little bit of your kind of elevator pitch, just to hear maybe a slightly different perspective on the red team and what it's aiming to accomplish.
Well, I think it took us a little while to get our sea legs because, Erica and another one of our members, Barbara, I think had a really clear picture of what a red team is, and probably one or two others did as well. But a lot of the red team kind of viewed ourselves as trying, rather than stress testing or critiquing current strategy, trying to come up with new strategies because we wanted Unity to succeed so much. But I think we got our sea legs under us, and we've done a fairly good job of trying to have a robust conversation about what the strengths and weaknesses are of the Unity movement, and also its strategy and its tactics. I mean, I can tell you that one of the things that I was just baffled by was the sort of implicit idea that even if you drafted Dan Crenshaw and Tulsi Gabbard and by some miracle they won, this would somehow change things. And that doesn't align with my understanding of the American political system at all. And it seemed to be putting way too much stock in the potential influence of someone in the White House. There's so many other power centers, and there's such a robust set of organized interests. You could even say that makes the whole policy system kind of sclerotic because there's so many organized interests that you have to bring together to get anything to happen. And I also was the sense that parties are the sole problem. I mean, the party duopoly is problematic, but I think, underlying or overlaying that is actually the development of the administrative state and the sort of separate power of bureaucratic agencies and authority that persists no matter who's in the White House. And that's not to say I buy into this deep state conspiracy. It's just, as Brett would say, it's the evolutionary nature of the system.
Yeah, it just keeps on going and figuring out ways to project itself into the future one way or another. So the red team thing, we I know, talking about it too, it kind of helped for some of us where, I know throughout within the movement, there's potential for us to kind of wonder, the long-term viability of it. But I think just discovering the red team, the existence of it, and the fact that so much emphasis is being placed on this kind of debugging kind of effort, kind of instilled a little bit more confidence in just this as a long-term movement in whatever form it takes. I know they kind of differentiated between a few of the different forms. Right.
That's one of the things we were working on, is sort of mapping out different forms and the strengths and weaknesses of them. I'm assuming Travis and Craig talked you through all that the last time, so I won't rehash that. But I think we had a really productive conversation among ourselves, and our sensibility was, when we made a presentation to the leadership team, it framed things in a way that was helpful for them as well.
Yeah, I think it gives a little bit more of a fundamental anchor to kind of hold on to. And I know our podcast team had kind of a very similar of like, all right, we're all a little bit relieved. Everything's kind of been resolved, maybe, at least as far as the electoral numbers go.
Yeah, I think we've got a breathing space. My sense is that wheels can come off very quickly here.
In a lot of different ways.
That Ocasio-Cortez and some progressives have declared the truce is over.
At the very least, we all kind of still came to the ground of there's still plenty to work on. There's still efficacy to what we're trying to do here. So, and there's a lot of different pieces that make everything go.
Yeah, I think not only is there efficacy, but I would say that there's a real need. And I know there are other organizations out there doing similar things, but anything that Unity can do to engage citizens in some introspection about how we can get to a healthier place. I mean, we're never going to go back to a time when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill have drinks together, but I think that there's a real thirst not only among the electorate, but also elected officials to try and get to a place where they can be productive. I mean, it's easy to demonize elected officials, but I mean, I know in my own research, I've done field interviews with members of Congress and staff, and they're really smart and good people that want the best to happen. But as we used to say when I was your age, it's the system, man.
Definitely. We still have, you know, our own aphorisms for that, I guess, but nothing. I mean, that's still the bedrock. It is the system. Well, going to like a granular level, I guess, then we'll dive in a little bit to our experience working at the polls. So that's like,
yeah, that'd be great.
The system, the political system of democracy in action at the ground level. I'm sure, I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious to hear. It sounds like it was your first experience.
Yeah, well, obviously I voted in every election, and I've seen neighbors and brought my kids to the polls, but I hadn't actually realized the level of effort that was necessary, and I'd say even more so now in Delaware than when I was voting in Pennsylvania or in New Jersey. I was just blown away by the level of technology in Delaware. I spoke to my kids who voted in Virginia, and another one voted out just outside of St. Louis. And I have to say, Delaware was light years ahead of them in their technology. It was pretty impressive.
Wow. So, yeah, I wonder if, I don't know, maybe one of the benefits and perks of being a smaller state is a little bit more agility in terms of incorporating technology. Yeah, that's really awesome to hear about.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know what your actual voting system was like. Where you
Ours in Ohio was, I would say also, like I have done other previous elections in Indiana, and that was all run smoothly. That had been maybe 10 years ago. It was like some right out of college. I did a few elections, and that all ran smoothly, but those were paper ballots scanned into kind of like what looked like a copy machine, Scantron sort of style. But everything seemed to work smoothly, and training was good. But here, yeah, Ohio has, or at least Columbus has, they had a training manual that was maybe 100 page workbook that was beautifully designed, really put together well, ample training. And yeah, we have iPads that were our poll books to register in voters as they came in through the door. And then we print off essentially a blank, a note. It's a receipt for them that scans into a digital machine for the vote. That then prints off a paper copy and is scanned through a machine.
Interesting. Yeah, so the actual hardware was a little bit different in Delaware. I don't know if it gets too in the weeds, just stop me. But so there were, at our polling station, there were 2 voting machines, but there were 3 what were called poll books, which were basically like tablets, but they were on stands, and they were hooked up to a database, and they presented us either a driver's license or a state ID card, or a voting card they got in the mail that had a barcode on it, and you just scanned it, and then their name popped up on your screen, and you confirmed that it was them, and then we printed out, I guess it would be about like a 12 or 13 inch long card that had a little code printed at the top. And in the actual voting machine, on the right of the machine, there was a slot or a chute with a glass window on it, and you feed it in there. And when it pulls it up, then your ballot comes up on a fairly large computer screen. It's all touch screen. And then after you vote, the card drops back into view in the window so you can verify that it printed the correct things, and you confirm the vote. And I guess at the end of the day, there's a little secure compartment that has a thumb drive in it with all recorded votes.
So after each voter, submitted their ballot, it was logged and held in that machine that they voted on?
Exactly. Yeah, there was a secure box on the back side that it fed into.
Gotcha. Yeah, ours seemed very similar. Kind of fed it the long slip of paper that but then it ended up printing their ballot results in kind of a formulated computerized digital thing that they took back to us. And on their way out, we had two scanning machines that were holding the ballots for storage for the rest of the day.
Right.
So very similar. Yeah. So the polls open in Ohio from, they're 6:30 a.m. until 7:30 p.m. And we were there.
You're tougher than we are. We open at 7.
Oh, nice. You get a little bit of sleeping in. We found out definitely within the first 30 minutes, that at a different precinct, the tablets that we had to be the digital poll books didn't upload, didn't get updated properly the night before in all of the precincts. So we had to revert to the paper poll book, which ended up being we were able to do that pretty well. There was plenty of documentation, and like I said, that manual is just as thorough as it gets. So we had the proper guidance and support to do, but finding that out half an hour before we're meant to let in this line that's wrapping around the around the street corner put a little pep in our step for sure.
Yeah, well, we had a similar kind of glitch. Things were pretty smooth when we opened up, and we're at a school, and I think I sent Kimberly a picture from our polling station about 7:30, where the line was already around the corner of the school. Everybody was socially distanced, but in pretty good mood. But things were moving along, and then I guess about 9:30, it was still a steady stream. Around 9:30, one of our voting machines crashed, and we only had 2. So we had to get tech support and reboot the thing. Fortunately, it's not that populous an area. So I think, all told, we had 1,900 registered voters in our precinct. And I believe we had a little north of 1,400 vote, which was great. It's like over 70%. But I think that I'm remembering the numbers. We had 721 show up the day of, but 690 had voted earlier by mail.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'll transition into that a little bit too. Our numbers were fairly similar. We had 5 precincts in the polling site that we were at, so that was its own kind of thing to navigate. But it ended up being, again, like everything went really smoothly for considering everything. And
one other thing I wanted to say is, I understand the need for the mail-in ballots in the COVID environment, but I think that there's something really deep and community building involved in people showing up at the polls. I mean, the spirit of the people in line, it didn't matter. And we had, Democrats and Republicans, and it was pretty clear to see some were, Trump supporters and others not. And we had, but everybody was engaged and in good spirits, and there were no hassles. And it was just, I think, a sense that everyone there was doing something important in a civic sense. And you lose that if you vote by mail. It just reinforces the kind of separation and enemy in a digital society, and getting people physically in the same place was, I thought, just awesome.
Yeah, we had a much bigger team than I expected working, which was also a surprise, but that I think factored in. We put it like Franklin County here in Ohio put out a call for volunteers and actually had to cut people off. They got more than enough people volunteering to work.
I wound up in Rehoboth instead of my hometown because there were so many volunteers, which is another really cool sign. People were very animated about this election.
Yeah, I'm curious about the demographics of the team that you had. Was it older, younger? Was it a mix of everything?
Well, I just retired, and I think I brought down the median age a little bit. But um, but it was, I guess, about 60% women, and about 40% men. There was one guy, oddly enough, from Indiana, who is a transplant, who was a lot younger than I.
Cool.
But there was a lot of retired folks.
And you said yours was kind of a little
retirement,
more
but everybody
rural.
worked together, and there were some, dyed in the wool Republicans. I remember getting in a conversation with one of these guys who was voting for Biden. And he was just so appalled by Trump that he couldn't vote Republican again.
Yeah.
But I think there's a probably mostly Democrat among the poll workers, and the only challenger he had was Democrat. We didn't have a Republican challenger. You're allowed two, one for each party. And actually, this is interesting footnote for me. I've been thinking a lot about the party duopoly. And in our training, I realized you have to be a member of either the Democrat or Republican Party to be a challenger, which is another way, this sort of duopoly gets reinforced. There's no such thing as an independent challenger.
Right. Interesting. I know in my case, I'm a registered independent. So ours was also mostly, I would say, a majority Democratic poll worker. So I actually was able to serve on the bipartisan teams, as we didn't have any challengers. It was, but yeah, judges or any sort of election related process that had to be done with a bipartisan team. I was typically standing in as the not Democrat. So it was also funny. I was serving the role as the Republican, which just always kind of tickled me to know, like, oh, definitely not fitting this mold, but
right,
yeah,
right.
Helping balance out the power there. And I think your age mention just brought me back to, I think, one of the very first times I ever served, and I went to a call out meeting on my college campus. Fairly sure that they offered pizza, which was part of the selling point, but that's how you do it. But they definitely mentioned the fact that how important it was to get some young blood working the polls, because eventually, the old women are going to die out at some point. So we need to restock with some fresh
meat.
Yeah. So, yeah. And actually in our site, it was a majority, I would say, people under 40. It was a very young crowd working. Yeah. Which was also great to see. And I think partially due to where I am, the urban environment is going to maybe bring that out a bit more, but yeah.
Right. And well, you got the university there as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's one quick story. It's funny you mentioned pizza. So there's a old pizza chain in this area called Grotto Pizza, and the guy who's the owner actually voted in our precinct. So he showed up and he had pizza gift cards for all the poll workers. I mean, so it's that kind of sort of community spirit that was very cool.
Yeah, definitely. So with the absentee voting, early voting, how is Delaware set up to do that? Were you getting absentee ballots coming in throughout the day, or was it all logged in the night before?
No. So it was all logged in ahead of time. I'm not aware of, there might have been some provisionals or late ballots, but when I opened when I looked on one of the poll books, the terminals, you could go to a monitor poll window and it would show you how many votes were already logged in, via mail.
Gotcha.
And we had a smattering of folks that didn't have the right ID, and we had to get them a provisional ballot.
Right. Yeah, we had our fair share of those as well. I would imagine you all had something similarly in place. So if someone had voted absentee by mail ahead of time and tried to come in they would have, pulled up in our system as
Right.
having already voted. Different states
Exactly.
had different rules, but definitely had systems in place to make sure, minimize, if not eradicate the
This was pretty
fraudulent
close to
behavior.
eradication, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Great. Well, yeah. What else about your experience then? Again, having been your first time, that maybe surprised you or you weren't expecting, and yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious to hear more.
I knew people voted early, but I was expecting a lot more traffic throughout the day. I mean, we were basically after about 4:30, we were dead. Just had a few stragglers drifting in. People were out early. I know, and it may be the COVID environment, but my recollection of voting was always that, I'd go either early in the morning or after work, and in either
Yeah.
case, there was a line, and midday was the slow point.
Yeah. My girlfriend served as well. We worked in the same precinct, and we were actually planning to vote, and we were working in our polling site, so we were able to vote on election day. And she was a little bit concerned. It was like, if it's going to be too busy, will we have time? And I was just like, based on my experience, there will be a boost in the morning. We'll have a long line then, maybe a little bit of a blip again at lunchtime, and then another rush after work. But similar to yours, it was we just had the early morning line, and really we had a little bit of a rush at the end of the day, but not as much as I was expecting.
Yeah, I should say one other thing kind of impressed me. It was very cool. We must have had 6 or 7 people they had to be late 80s, early 90s, either with a caregiver or they were hobbling in on a walker. And, do you want a chair to sit? Because, you had to maintain 6 feet of distance and wait in line. And these guys were just stalwarts. It was so impressive to see. And people in line cheering them. It was very cool.
Yeah, we had a first time voter who was in, I think, his mid 30s. So that was he was the one who got the biggest applause in our room. But yeah, it's just, again, going to your earlier point about just this turnout being as high as it was, and just energizing so many people to get out and do it, even if they hadn't up until this point.
Right.
Was something else. We also offered, for people who weren't comfortable coming inside, whether or not they either couldn't wear a mask, refused to, we offered curbside voting. So that actually required one of our bipartisan teams to go out and essentially kind of perform the absentee process of getting their information, coming inside, checking the poll book, getting their, like, having a sealed or an empty ballot brought out back to them at the car so they could fill it out, and then they would seal it in the envelope, which had the form printed on the back of it. So they sealed it, and we brought it back in.
Yeah, we had a supply of masks, and I suppose you went through this too. In our little 80 or 90 page booklet, there was a section on PPE and protocols for sanitizing styluses people would use, and how frequently to wipe down the touch screens and the booths, the voting machines and whatnot.
Yeah. The extra workers that we had on site at Senga, we had a big team, came in handy with a lot of that, just very frequent, pretty steadily going around the room. And
yeah, it was, if you think about that Hidden Tribes report, it was cool to see a lot of the frustrated middle there. It looked like, and it was kind of uplifting. I mean, I know the country is polarized, but I got the real sense that this polarization is kind of a mile wide and an inch deep, and that there might be a way to break through.
yeah,
My sense is that a lot of that frustrated middle from the Hidden Tribes model actually came out and voted this time where they hadn't in the past.
yeah. Maybe it's like, the frustration, but still much more open-minded than we might give them credit for. Or
Yeah.
So that's I guess, reassuring, exciting kind of development.
Yeah, it was like being in a totally different environment, a totally different universe than what you see if you read newspapers or listen to cable TV, or if you're on social media, it seemed like almost like a completely different America.
Yeah. Yeah. I think our biggest conflict, which is, it's not even to say that it was a conflict, was someone who was still outside in line and had Make America Great Again mask and hat on. And we had one of our workers ask him, you know, you're not going to be able to wear that within the poll, within the precinct. So we have masks to offer you to replace it, and just, you know, ask that you take the hat off. And he was being a little bit obstinate, and actually got us to start up the process for treating him as a curbside voter, because he just didn't want to come in. And by the time we gathered our team up, got all the supplies to go out to him, he decided he would comply. So
yeah, we had two guys that were they were a little short of obstinate. I think they were grumpy about asking him to. And one guy had a balaclava on. I just, you know, somebody had a problem with it and came in and got me. And I said, I'd like to ask you, could you just pull up your balaclava just for everybody else around here? And he gave me the eye roll and all, but he pulled it up. And it was, I think, kind of being in the middle of people, got him to comply.
And that goes again a little bit to your point of just the community aspect of, I mean, it's, you know, we're in a pandemic, we're, you know, doing social distancing to differing degrees, depending on where you are, but having everyone in that place for that purpose, and knowing that the people who are working the poll site are there to facilitate that. It seemed like there was, that kind of shared energy, that spirit of like just understanding that we're all part of this process that is so fundamental and core to the country that we're in.
Yeah, it was all a very cool experience, but, you know, I have to say, you know, after a few days of watching the results roll in and the ground shift and, you know, the sort of name calling and backbiting, it's I don't think the incentives that drive these people who are at the polls are the same incentives that drive the people who are manning the news desks on cable TV or the party apparatus. They've got a whole different set of incentives.
Definitely.
And, I guess in a way this sort of gets back to the whole purpose of Unity, is how to get them to represent the kind of people you and I saw at the polls, as opposed to representing the people who they do represent, the loudest voices in the deepest pockets.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. What, I don't know, did you have any insights in terms of, I mean, with your poli-sci background, was there anything about the day, about the process that, maybe through your lens specifically might, I don't know, stood out to you?
You're talking about election day or the week?
I guess all of it. Yeah, any of it. Yeah, I know this is just all kind of, election day was a long day for us, but it has seemed to stretch from, you know, a day to almost an entire week. So obviously we were off.
Yeah. So I guess I had two impressions that kind of pulled me in different directions. The first we've already talked about. I was really jazzed about the level of turnout, and I thought there was plenty of opportunity. There was certainly a lot of chatter about possibilities of intimidation or even violence, and that didn't happen. And I thought that was all to the good and very inspiring. On the other hand, we're still operating in the same system. With it, and one of the things that's so aggravating about this whole environment is if you go to the polling places like you and I did, you can see the sort of basic decency and patriotism of the voters. But after the polls close, they're no longer on stage. And the people who are on stage are the same set of actors who are, causing the problem. And it's not always, or I'd say not even usually, because the actors, whether they're special interests or party apparatchiks or elected officials or administrators, none of them are, well, very few of them are nefarious or malevolent, despite what the names that get tossed around. But their incentives are just not to represent the set of people that are out. So there's this disjunction that we're still stuck with between the electorate and the people who occupy positions of power and control levers of power.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure Joe Biden believes a lot of what he says, that he's proud of his country and he wants to reach out to all sorts of people. But, when the cameras go off and you're in the back room, it's a whole different set of incentives.
Yeah, definitely.
And and all those people are not around the table.
Right. And I wonder, how few politicians are, I wonder how many of them are working those polls. Like it's a day away from a job that it could be easily done. It would be great to, push.
Well, they're not allowed to the polls. That would be politicking. You can't do that.
But as a public servant of just kind of, it's speaks to kind of that disconnect of just like, if they really knew what was going on here, and were able to see that. But again, with the system that's in place, that's incentivizing looking the other way or just kind of looking past that ground level decency. Sure.
And I mean, this is one of the things we had some conversations about on the red team. I think something we've got to recognize about our system is that in a kind of perverse way, this is going to sound super cynical, but in a perverse way, the more transparency and the more direct forms of democracy, ironically, the harder it is to represent the people, and the harder it is to reach compromise. One of the things I shared with the red team was a really cool little research paper by the Congressional Research Service. For the listeners that don't know what that is, that's a professional research staff that just serves Congress. And they can analyze policy, they can analyze institutions. In any event, the CRS published a study of how institutional reforms in Congress to promote transparency and supposedly accountability, like doing away with earmarks, doing things in public and more transparently, actually makes it harder for members of Congress to compromise. If you can go behind closed doors and you can horse trade or log roll, actually, I'm going to add a little tidbit here. I was watching the Dark Horse podcast last night, and Brett and Heather were struggling about what log rolling means. He said he remembered it from when he was in ninth grade. So, I mean, that's how Congress used to work. So the idea of log rolling is it's like this athletic event that loggers used to do, where each stands on the end of a log and they literally walk on either end of the log, spinning it in the water, rolling the log. And the idea of the sport is to see who can make the other guy fall in the drink. But in Congress, the idea is they both stay on top of the log by vote trading. And,
interesting.
Vote trading sounds horrible, but it's actually how things get done in Congress, or how they used to get done in Congress.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Another aspect of this is, we've talked about this in Unity ad nauseum about how the use of primaries to select candidates as opposed to, smoke-filled rooms and party conventions winds up driving more extreme candidates who are less likely to be able to compromise.
So does this, I know you're interested also in some of the proportional voting schemes, or have some insight on that with either ranked choice or other ones. I don't know if
You mean
this,
ranked choice voting?
yeah, if this ties in or cuts into that at all, or kind of, yeah, if it's
Yeah,
just its own
I
thing.
mean, I don't, I don't have a I can see pros and cons to ranked choice voting, but I think any kind of a technical fix like that isn't really going to get at what the deep institutional problems are in our
The
country. And then and ranked choice voting also, you know, I know Brett is a big fan of game theory. If you look at game theory or formal analysis of voting schemes, there's an important distinction between sincere and strategic voting. So anytime you institute a technical system like a ranked choice voting, it kind of assumes everybody is voting sincerely, but you can vote strategically too.
yeah,
Or you could fund candidates, to get them to run to sort of muddy up the waters of ranked choice voting. Or I know in Maine, one of the third party candidate was encouraging her voters about whom they should rank second. So there are all sorts of ways to play with the system, and
and it
that is
almost seems kind of
susceptible
like,
to manipulation as the current system we have. I mean, I think the big problem we have is this plurality, winner take all, first past the post system.
yeah, it's almost, it kind of seems like almost once you introduce some, like you're saying, this technological adaptation, it's a contrivance in some form or another that almost kind of encourages or yeah, it encourages some level of strategic manipulation. Yeah. And like you were saying too, it doesn't account for these perpetuated relationships that are going on among the politicians themselves, which has just been historically happening. So I mean that doesn't address that. At least, I mean, it would be a multi-iterative process to even maybe eventually weed those out. But
Yeah, what's interesting to me here is I'd love to see as much concern in Unity about the institutional forms and procedures in Congress as we have about elections and the presidency. I actually saw a neat interview with, was it Catherine Gale, who's she and Richard Porter wrote a cool little critique of the duopoly and competition. And we've discussed this on the Red Team. And she was focusing a lot on how Congress operates to militate against compromise and in favor of listening to donors and organized interest groups. And I think we need to pay a lot of attention to that. The way we think about Congress now is kind of interesting, where all the focus is on the leadership. Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, and their various lieutenants. And that system where the leadership can control what votes come to the floor and control the policy agenda is a very different kind of congressional set of processes than when I was growing up. I mean, when I was growing up, leadership wasn't in that strong a position. It was committee chairs who really controlled the process, and each committee chair or even subcommittee chair was kind of like a feudal lord, and you could actually see where the donors would wind up giving a lot of money, pretty evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans, because they want an entree to those committees. But now this sort of donation gets centralized to these PACs that are controlled by the leadership. And to the extent that individuals are dependent on leadership and donors, they have to toe the line for this central authority. And it makes compromise way harder and makes vote trading way harder.
Interesting. It's like the financial kind of manifestation of the kind of like single issue voter kind of thing, where it's if you're able to put your money where your mouth is, but on a specific committee that's, you know, focused on something that is near and dear to your heart, as opposed to now having to maybe hedge all of that on a single party.
Well, and you can't, and you can't bring home the bacon like you used to, right? I mean, we got rid of earmarks, and everybody sort of understood how the game was played. I mean, there's, if you could bring home money for VA hospitals and defense bases or new post offices and, programs in your area, that often gave you a little bit of freedom to vote in a way that might not quite align with the ideology or the political philosophy of your constituency. And that is not the case anymore. And it's gotten even worse with gerrymandering, of course, where the districts are constructed to not be competitive.
Well, I know we're getting up near our time. We've got a little bit more time left, but I know we've gotten a little bit away from the polls, but that's great. We're happy to have you on board with the Red Team. It seems like the level of knowledge and insight that you're bringing to some other stuff that maybe isn't getting as much spotlight on it, and it sounds like it's, again, just fleshing out ideas to make this the most robust thing that we possibly can. I guess, real quick, on as far as the polls go, do you think you'll do it again?
As far as the polls go?
Yeah, in future elections, would you work it again? As a poll worker?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm hopeful that there'll be more in-person voting, and that the participation rates stay as high as they are. In a way, all the positive experience at the poll energized me even more with respect to Unity, because I'm so animated about this disjunction between the spirit and the citizenship you see at the polling station versus the way the system serves, or I should say doesn't serve, those people.
Yeah. I came away with a very similar kind of takeaway, and just from the spirit of the full day. And just a range of voters that it's just, some of them were apparent, some of them were less apparent, but it just, everybody was there for one thing. And like you said, the decency was palpable, I guess, like an energizing.
I love the way you put that. The decency was palpable.
Yeah. And again, like, I'm completely in favor. I recognize the importance of allowing as many people to vote as possible, and doing it by mail facilitates that in a way. But again, I appreciate the way you stress that too. It's like, you can't stress it enough how there is something about the experience of doing it that it would be it would be unwise for us to just kind of swiftly, sweep that aside if in favor of something more technological or mail in.
Literally, you do not want to mail this in.
Exactly. Well, Richard, thank you so much for your time. We're so happy to have you and appreciate you working the polls. Obviously, helping everything go. This gigantic system that we're a part of, complex as it is. Is there any final thoughts you would like to get out? It's your final pulpit to say what you want to say.
Yeah. So I'm really hopeful that Unity can maintain this level of engagement, and I think it's really important for us as a community to come up with strategy and tactics really quick, so the energy that's there doesn't dissipate. I think this has got like I said, there are other groups out there doing their own things, and when we get our organizational act together, it will be really important to partner with them. But I think that we're bringing a unique perspective. I don't think there are many other groups out there that are really focused like a laser, as Unity is, on what are the structural and incentive-based impediments to giving us the kind of system we have. I mean, on the red team, we talked about this quite a bit, that there are lots of sort of good government groups out there over the years, like Common Cause or PERG. They're basically send us your money and we'll represent you. It's what Unity has to offer is this level of engagement. It's not a kind of top-down organized entity, and it's got an opportunity, I think, to generate a movement for real structural and procedural change. The trick for us is going to be how to make that sexy and saleable.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to get people jazzed about climate change and abortion, issues like that. And it's hard to get people agitated and energized about fixing congressional or electoral procedures. And I would say that job one for us is how to make that, which we all see in Unity as the keystone for trying to not fix, but improve the system. How do we communicate its importance and its relevance to a wider public?
Yeah. Great. Couldn't agree more. Again, Richard Harris, thank you so much for your time. I'm Gabe Garber. This is UnityNow podcast. Feel free to, if you like what we're doing, follow us, like us, leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're also up on YouTube under UnityNow podcast. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for tuning in. For more conversations and content like this, be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you prefer: Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. If you prefer to consume your podcasts in video format, you'll find full episodes and clips on YouTube. Follow the Unity Now podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram by clicking the links in the description below, and be sure to sign up and get involved at articlesofunity.org. Bah!